Trust me.
Welcome everyone to the August 11th Eugene City Council work session, the last one before our council break. Welcome to everyone here and everyone at home. And the number one item today is the work session on the downtown site development. City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. And I'll just open with a couple of remarks, and then I'll turn it over to Denny to work us through. And then, of course, Sue's here for any of the financial kinds of questions that you might have. Just to provide a little background, you might know that just a little over a year ago, you provided direction to us on several local actions that we could take to help stimulate the economy. And since that time, a lot has been going on in the downtown. Of course, the $10 million redevelopment of the Center Court building is underway by the Beam group out of Portland. LCC is moving forward on their project. The first hotel in the downtown in 28 years is expected to break ground this fall, which is another $10 million investment. Public safety is underway. We're having a successful summer in the city. There's the food carts, art and public spaces, and so there's a lot that's been going on in the downtown. And so this is now sort of the next phase of that, which is moving forward on the development of the Astor Pit. And you might remember when we originally had this project, it was the Center Court and the Astor Pit together. At that time, we had made some commitments, both financially and as tenants. Subsequent to that, those initial plans, the projects, while the Bennett Corporation and Beam are coordinating, there will be essentially two different kinds of projects going forward. But we're very excited about that, and a part of that excitement is that we can actually put the downtown pits behind us. And you have both of them underway, which I think will be a tremendous value to the downtown. And so I'll let Denny talk a little bit more about the details, and of course we're here for questions.
Thank you. So I'm going to briefly cover a few things related to this development proposal. First, some background on the property. Second, an overview of what is being proposed. And third, the action being requested today and the future council actions that would be required for this proposal. And again, starting back in 2008 when Beam purchased the Center Court building and the adjacent vacant property from the Urban Renewal Agency, Beam proposed a project that included the rehab of the Center Court building and construction of a new office building on the adjacent parcel, and both were to occur simultaneously in the original proposal. Then in December of 2009, Council approved a request from Beam to phase the project, allowing that rehab to begin, but also requiring that Beam bring forward the second phase that's ready to proceed no later than May 2011. Clearly, the visibility of Beam's construction activity is generating some excitement downtown. It also appears to be boosting confidence in this area of the downtown, and particularly has boosted some interest in redevelopment of this adjacent property. Beam has been working on strategies to move forward with the second phase of their project, including collaboration with other developers. With the proposal that's on the table, Beam would like them to transfer the property and the development rights to Bennett Management Company, and Beam and Bennett have reached an agreement in concept to that effect. And before I get into the details of the actual proposal, just a little bit of information on Bennett Management Company. They're a local firm, family-owned business operating in Eugene for over 40 years, mostly known for the redevelopment of the historic property that houses the Downtown Athletic Club. They've also developed commercial office buildings, retail, new apartment buildings, affordable housing, and condominiums. Generally, they retain ownership and manage the properties that they build. Most recently, they've developed the terraces at the Pavilion, which are the condominiums near Oakway Center. They also manage several commercial and residential properties in the area. Bennett Management's history and their local experience suggests that they're very capable developers with a good feel for downtown and a good feel for local market conditions here in Eugene. What Bennett is proposing is a project that's very similar to Beam's original proposal. They're proposing new construction, which would include ground floor retail, floor floors of office building above the retail, and embedded parking. Total cost of the project would be about $10 million. Bennett is prepared to invest close to $2 million in this project, and they've received preliminary approval preliminary financing commitment from their bank for the project. Based on the bank's underwriting criteria, which we can imagine is more difficult these days,
I believe that must be Counselor Zelenka.
Hi, Alan.
Yeah, this is Alan from joining the conference by conference call.
All right, we're in the middle of a conversation on the Bean, the property next to the Bean property, the
Right. And I'll
after
put
pit.
mine on mute, so if you ask me a question, give me a second to unmute.
Okay, thank you, Dan.
so again, based on the bank's underwriting criteria, there are a few things that Bennett is requesting that will help them secure the financing for the project. And those are summarized in the agenda item material, but basically they include, first, Bennett needs to own the property, and they will likely need to restructure the existing underlying debt that's on the property. Second, Bennett is proposing to use a portion of the city's recovery zone bond authority to help the project achieve a lower interest rate. And we'll talk about the recovery zone details here in just a second. Third, Bennett is asking the city to commit to approximately 20,000 square feet of office space, 10,000 of which would be lease space, and 10,000 of which would be lease guarantee. This lease commitment is needed to help them meet the bank's 65 to 70% pre-leased requirement, and is similar but less than the 50,000 square feet that we previously had committed to Beam on this property. And finally, we may be asked to fill a financing gap through our downtown loan program, with that amount being considered after the bank has finalized the terms, and we can come up with a definitive financing gap that's in the project. I'd like to elaborate just a little bit on the proposed use of the recovery zone bond authority. Basically, the city can issue a bond that has the effect of giving a tax-exempt status to their bank loan, and this allows the bank to offer a lower interest rate for the project. Bennett would be responsible for repaying the bank loan. Bennett would assume all the transaction costs associated with the bond, and there would be no financial risk assumed by the city. I guess simply stated, this looks and feels like a conventional bank loan, with the exception of it achieves a lower interest rate because of the bond mechanism. And Sue Custer-George is here at the table if you have questions later about the mechanics of the recovery zone bond. For the Bennett project, we're proposing to use approximately $8 million of our $11 million facility bond authority. And it's important to note that our bond allocation must be drawn down by the end of this calendar year, which means the bank loan would have to close and it'd have to begin disbursement within that time frame. And those are the summary, kind of the details of the project. Again, the action that we're seeking today is council's general support for the proposed Bennett Management Project, and the recommendation is to bring back the project details for council consideration in September, including the transfer of Beam's property ownership and development rights to Bennett Management, creation of the required recovery zone, and a preliminary authorization for the city to issue the proposed recovery zone bond.
Thank you. So one of the questions I know the community will be interested in, that's why I want to ask you now, I've heard the answer to this, but I think we need to have it out to talk about, is all of us are really interested in having more housing downtown, and probably hope that this building might end up being used for some housing purposes, and so I know that there's a good reason why that's not the case, but I would like you to explain that for people.
Well, I would start with, originally Beam actually considered housing as part of either in the center court building or for new construction in the pit, and came to the conclusion that the gap was just too large. Bennett's original look at this project was a preference for a housing project, and concluded again that the gap is just too large. They would have to ask the city to do too much, basically, to make it work. And there's some reasons. The lease rates for commercial office are higher than housing. You also lose some economies of scale with a housing project, because in order to get light into all of the space, you can't build right up against the center court building, so you have to carve out some of the upper floors to get light in, so you lose some square footage, which again, the combination of less square footage and lower lease rates economically is just hard on a property of this size to get those economies of scale to make that work. We showed Opus this property after their student housing project didn't move forward on the Sears site, and it didn't work for them. The good news is there are a couple of housing opportunities still in the neighborhood, and one clearly is LCC student housing project, and the other is on the Taco Time site. And there's, some potential movement on that property to bring, 50 to 60 units of market rate housing right across the street. So there's still an opportunity looming, hopefully, but we've looked at housing at this, and I think that was an initial preference for many people, but it's the economics are just
allowed.
upside down.
So I guess the point that I would want to make here is given the financial situation, given the size of the property and all the things you talked about, the use that's being proposed seems like the best use at this point, but that we still are committed to housing and recognize the need for increased housing in our downtown, and we'll keep working on it. The other thing that I wanted to point out to people is in your comments under the recovery zone bonds, there is a quote here that says that no city money would be used for the transaction. The city this is on page 219, first paragraph. No city money would be used for the transaction. The city would not be lending money to BMC Bennett, the Bennett Company. The city would not be taking any financial risk by entering into this transaction on behalf of BMC, and that seems really important for the community to hear and recognize that. Mike?
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, Denny, I want to say thank you to staff for working on this and for bringing this to us. I'm generally supportive of everything I see here, and I also appreciate that we have members of the community, especially ones with a track record of such success, that are willing to invest in downtown. I think that speaks to the success of what we've been doing so far, and hopefully the new direction that our downtown has begun to take. I did have a question, however, here that perhaps you could help educate me a little bit here, where it talks about the potential DRLP loan to close the gap. I was unable to find anything that told me what that would likely be, the amount of that.
I think what we've
Gap
said at this
funding?
point is they're anticipating that there could be a gap, and that's really based on the bank doing their work on the appraisal, looking at the cash flow coverage and the loan-to-value ratios, and we may have to participate to some extent with some subordinate financing that's layered behind the bank, and that's traditionally what we do
Right.
in our downtown loan program. What we don't really know is the amount.
A range, maybe?
I could tell you that we have about $1.8 million in the loan program available. We wouldn't likely use all of that for a single project because we have other projects like the housing project across the street. I would forecast that it would be less than 10% of the overall project financing, which, considering what we've done in Beam, where we're at a much higher percentage, that's a pretty reasonable approach, I think, to get this project off the
Does
ground.
that deplete the fund?
No, I think, again, there's $1.8 million, and if we were
Remaining
under $1 million,
Okay.
let's say, there would still be some room to do, a housing project and some other small things in the loan program. And the funds revolve. They are loans. They get
Right,
repaid.
sure.
So there's always funds being generated.
I'm just looking at if there was ever, if we would be putting into a place where we would have to replenish the loan fund in any way just to meet all obligations. So it doesn't seem like that's going to be the case, correct?
We wouldn't replenish it all in this single project. I mean, we wouldn't use it all in this single project, yes.
Thank you very much.
George Poling?
You just answered one of my questions. The other question is, of the recovery zone facility bonds, there'd be $3 million left over. What happens to that?
Well, the allocations are of interest to the state, and so to the extent we don't use that allocation, the state will want to have it back to see if they can use it on another project in the state. They are actively looking for additional allocations that they can use on a project elsewhere.
Okay, and that was a point that I was going to bring up. The next sentence that in our AIS on page 219 that the mayor read from, the following sentence was, the city's recovery zone bond allocation has a limited duration. The state of Oregon has indicated that it will pursue the city's allocation in September for another purpose if those allocations are not committed to local projects. I think it's important for us to remember that money goes away from us if we don't use it. So, and I think this is a great project for this part of town. I'm supportive of it. We're actually being asked to commit or guarantee leasing of less square footage than we had originally with Beam. Is that correct? By about 30,000 square feet?
Correct. So it's less than half.
Less than half. So, it's like the stars all aligned at the right time here on this project, and I'm really excited about it, and hopefully we can move forward on it.
George Brown?
Thank you.
Can you speak, Mayor?
Yep, I'll put you in the queue.
So these funds became available in February of 2009. I think that's when the president signed the AERA, the Recovery Act. Have we used, and we were, the state figured out the formula for the counties and the cities, and the county got $12 million for both parts of the bonds, and we got 20. Have we used any of them yet?
We have not. So we've been considering, when various opportunities have come up, whether this would be the right tool to use, and so far it hasn't worked out to be the right tool for any particular other project.
So Bennett Management Company is the first one that's actually expressed interest in using this program. And just coincidentally, has the county used it at all that you're aware of? I don't recall ever reading anything.
Not that we're aware of.
Not aware of it.
They have talked with the board about the program, but I don't think they've actually issued
No,
it.
I've done a little reading, a little Googling about this, because it was kind of a new thing to me. And, that's not unusual all over the whole country. People are not taking advantage of them because there's too many difficulties. And it's just not that attractive usually for the developers. So I'm happy to see Bennett Management Company interested. I mean, we knew, I looked back at the original agreement, dug out the old AIS, and sure enough, there's a letter from Brad Maslin saying that indicating that, well, we may not be able to do this, but Bennett's interested, and this is from last December, so that part wasn't in the recovery zone bond. So we need to create a recovery zone. The whole thing ends December 31st anyway, right? It's gone unless somehow the feds resurrect it. I support pretty much every element of this proposal except the part of the city guaranteeing 20,000 square feet. That made me nervous about the previous one too. But I think I'll go ahead and support this for now and then see what the final, thing looks like when it comes back. I guess that's enough for this round. A couple more questions.
I've got Andrea, and then Alan, and then George Polling, and then Betty. Andrea.
Thank you, Mayor. So I support this, and I think it's a good idea, but I just kind of wanted to ask a couple of questions that I know the answers to, because I think that the perception could be in other parts of the community that this is, how else to say it, so I'll be me, good old boys just helping each other out. And so was anybody else interested in doing this? Was there any other people that spoke to Beam about the possibility of working with them?
Beam has had other conversations over the last 2 years, really, as they've
Okay,
been...
so they've been beating the bushes and looking for somebody basically to help them, and this is the only company that was able to fulfill or fit the criteria.
Yeah, and I think it's, the fact that this recovery zone bond is available helps put it over the hump and actually makes it more feasible. Really hard for a private sector project to get bank financing today, so
Yeah.
I think what's being proposed here is kind of extraordinary, and that's why there haven't been many opportunities,
Okay.
because that bank financing is critical.
Okay. So I'm comfortable with us participating and being a part of their building. I think that as we go down the road, there's going to be a lot of other conversations about this place, for instance, and so who knows where we'll end up. So I'm comfortable with that, and I'm glad to see that it's a local company, and hopefully they'll use local contractors, which will create local jobs. And other than that, that's it for me, Mayor.
Alan?
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
I had a couple questions. One of them was the one that Andrea just asked, which is about other options that they pursued, and that was answered. The other, if I got this right, there's no city money being lended or used, correct?
With the exception of the possibility of us loaning some money out of our downtown loan program, but not out of the...
Yeah, but that was already committed to, to make up the difference.
Yes.
The stopgap.
The bond proceeds
Do we have
will
an
not be loaned.
Do you have an idea of what that might be? How much?
The loan amount?
Sounds
Yeah, for the gap.
We just speculated that we anticipated it'd be less than 10% of the overall project, which is a $10 million project. So, I think our level of participation should be expected to be less than $1 million. We don't really know until we see the appraisal and all the other things that the bank has to go through.
Right. Was that inclusive or exclusive of the original $404,000 your LP?
Well, as mentioned in the agenda item write-up, we may need to restructure the underlying financing on the land. There is a $404,000 note with Beam. It begs the question, 2 years later, is that property still worth that? And does this project work with the assumption of that much debt? And that's part of what we'll have to negotiate with Bennett is how to treat the existing underlying debt on the land. So there may be some restructuring of the term.
Right, I got that part. But the additional gap financing would be up to maybe another $1 million, which would be in addition to that amount.
Yes.
Okay. And there's no other than those loans. The recovery zone facility bond approach doesn't put any financial risk to the city, but because it's a private bank. But our participation in it by authorizing this makes it be a tax exempt, lower interest.
Yes.
Well, how does that? So that's just a fact. That's an IRS function.
Correct.
Okay. And we also need to have a project by September, as George said, or the state will reallocate it. Is there a process whereby there might be a round two of this stuff that we could maybe come up with a project to? Do we know anything about that? What round two would look like for unused money that would go back into reallocation that we might be able to use for another project?
Well, there's a couple things. One is that, Congress is considering whether to do additional allocations or extend the deadlines, but, there's no definitive answer as to when that would happen or what it might look like. And then with the existing allocations, the state has a project in mind. They have a large project that they are trying to come up with an allocation to pay for, and so I think once we give our allocation up, it's gone.
Oh, okay. Okay. And then it also said in the AIS that these types of bonds that residential developments are not eligible, so that's kind of one of the problems with the residential, although I'd really like to see more residential and housing built downtown, but this program doesn't allow that.
That is correct.
And they need to draw on the funds by the end of this year, so that really limits how many projects can really go forward as well, correct?
Absolutely.
And on the first page of the AAS, there's 3 bullets there talking about the different loans. So the subordination of the existing financing mechanisms through the DRLP, could you define what subordination and restructuring, what's subordination? I know what restructuring means, but...
That means we have a lien on the property currently, and in order for the bank to make their loan has to go in front of us, so we need to subordinate and allow our loan to go behind the bank.
For both the gap finance one as well?
Yes, we are traditionally...
So we need second line.
And that's the way the loan program traditionally operates, is the bank will require first position on all the collateral.
So that wouldn't be different than normally the way we would do it?
Not at all.
Okay. And then the third bullet, I didn't quite get. The city is committed to occupy 10,000 square feet and guarantee an additional 10,000 square feet of office space. I didn't understand why you wrote that sentence that way in the distinction there.
I guess the distinction is we would sign a lease for 10,000 square feet with the expectation that we would actually occupy that 10,000 square feet. We would guarantee 10,000 square feet with the hope of never having to actually make the lease payments and hopefully never having to occupy that space. So that guarantee would be reduced as the private sector commits to space in the building. So, again, our hope is by the time the building is done, in the best of all worlds, we would never have to act on our guarantee. At some point, in the building's construction design, we need to commit to being in the space if we're going to be in the space, because there's plans that need to be made as far as moving and all that. So I think that's why it's structured that way, that we commit to being in 10,000 square feet. It's possible that they could find a tenant for the whole building between now and September or whatever, and we may not have to do that. But the concept is to actually sign a lease for 10 and guarantee 10.
So we would, let me turn that back and see if I got it right. So we would occupy and guarantee 10,000 square feet, and then we would guarantee another 10,000 feet, but both of those guarantees go away if they have somebody else to step in front of us and take over each of those 10,000 square feet for a total of 20.
Alan, I'm going to let Denny answer this, but your time's up, and if you want another round, I'll be glad to come back to you.
That was my last question.
Yes, it is possible that, given the timing, if the timing worked out, and if they were able to find another tenant for the entire 20,000 square feet, or a group of tenants, that we would never have to actually move in or guarantee the lease. But I think the expectation is that going into this, that we would be at least leasing and occupying 10,000 square feet and guaranteeing the other 10.
Additional. Okay.
And again, the reason is so that they can close their bank loan and start dispersing, because without those lease commitments, the bank will not disperse based on the underwriting criteria.
Great. Thank you, Mayor. I'm in support of this proposal.
Okay, thank you, George, and then Betty, and then George Brown, and then Chris.
I've got a question about I don't know if you could do this or not, but it says that the recovery zone economic development bonds may be used by public entities, which means us, for infrastructure and facilities, among other items. Can we take any of that excess money, put it into the new police facility, take the exact same amount of money out of what we put into the facility reserves, put it back into the facility reserves to use for other things?
No, because we didn't anticipate doing that, and we have to make a declaration that we're going to reimburse ourselves when we're doing a tax-exempt bond. So no, we can't do that.
That was a workshop.
That was worth a shot. Yeah. Betty, you're next.
Thanks. I am supportive of the project, and I'm glad that it's someone that we know. We know that Bennett has been successful in other projects, so that we're not taking a big chance. And I have a question. It's not a real question, but we're not going to call it the Astor Building, are we?
And it definitely won't have pit anywhere in
We've
there.
been calling it Astor Pit for so long.
I noticed I didn't use that term.
He's left town, we got something named for him. I did ask for more information, which I don't see yet, about how much space are we currently renting downtown?
We currently lease approximately 40,000 square feet of space downtown.
And I also asked, when do those leases expire?
Well, they vary because we're scattered all over.
Could we get...
Most of them within the next 5 years.
I'm thinking we could easily transfer some of those offices that we're currently renting space for to this place. And I did ask Mike, but I don't see the information yet, when those various leases expire and how much. But I think we could easily take care of it in that way. And I hope that we would not renew those leases until we find out whether we're obligated to take some space here. Have you thought about that?
We have, and
Sure you
that
have.
whole discussion will be a part of the discussion around the City Hall, which is coming back to the council after your break in September. And so that will be all part of that. But our intent is to try to minimize our total financial outlay with all of our space in the downtown, to include current leases, being able to commit to this project if we have 10 or 20,000 feet, trying to minimize our financial commitment other places. So
I want to know, aside from City Hall, if you're not talking about that. I know that there are places rented, but I've seen the list in the past, but I don't know where they all are now, and I would like...
So part of that we can either send out ahead of time, or as part of the City Hall conversation, we can also bring all of that.
But really, it's a part of this conversation.
it's a part of the conversation that we are committing to
Okay.
20,000. What specifically
Yeah.
goes in there, we don't know yet, because it'll,
I'm thinking, okay,
Yeah.
I just want to know places that we are paying rent currently.
right, and we can send that out. We'll send that out to you again.
And how much and when the leases expire, because that would, seems to me to be a really easy thing to move some of those if we need to, and move it into, we'd just be renting from someone else. And I would like to know whom we're renting them from, too.
We have that information.
Okay,
We'll send that out.
thank you. That's all.
George Brown?
Thank you. I've got a few more questions. Initially, for Beam got a DRLP loan, Downtown Revitalization Loan Program loan, $434,000 to purchase the property. So we would transfer that over to that.
Beam
That
would-
loan,
Beam would be relieved of their obligation to repay that, and that would be
Okay.
transferred over to Bennett. What we haven't determined yet is what the terms of that transfer might look
whether the
like.
property's still worth $400,000 or not, 404. Seems to me like it'd be worth the same or more because someone's
More.
building a building right next to it, but that's another conversation. I certainly don't see it being worth any less, personally. This, basically the city, I guess this might be for the benefit of people watching and listening. This recovery zone, these facility bonds, and I got this from Lawpedia. Wyden's office, Ron Wyden's office. The only benefit that recovery zone facility bonds provide is their tax exempt status on the debt interest. This is the sole subsidy provided. That might help. I didn't understand it at first. What's tax exempt? So, for the research. So the city, basically, we're acting as pass-through. We're not liable for anything. Will we be charging an administration fee? Is it going to be staff times? Does the applicant?
Most of the is legal work associated with this,
Legal, yes, there'll be a tremendous,
which goes into
large
the
amount of legal work.
which goes into the fees that would be responsible by the borrower, or Bennett in this
The
case.
borrower's responsible for those fees, yes. And then, basically, the one that's on the line for this is it the federal government or is it the bank? I mean, let's say that somehow, I know what will happen. Let's just say there was a massive financial disaster and this whole project fell apart after the everything went down. Who's ultimately responsible?
Bank.
The bank would.
I mean, the bank would bear that risk.
The bank's just out.
It's just like any other kind of a development loan to,
They're responsible to the feds, to the bonds.
no, the federal government isn't involved in that way. The only way the federal government is involved is in providing the tax exemption.
I see.
So-
Okay, all right. Okay, good. That helps clarify it for me. Thank you. There's one thing I'd like, we're going to be talking about the City Hall thing after we come back from our break, and I think it would be helpful if we have square footage of what's going to be left here at City Hall for each of the departments after the police move. We just subtract, whatever the police is using now, like how much the court's using and what we want. But just to know what we have now, and what human resources have, and what we have here. And that council should use. I think that would be useful for maybe the pieces of
Okay, Chris?
Nicely, Betty and George really got into the area that I was really going to talk about, is our awareness that we need to do something about this building. And so I think what they're asking for is very important information to have for that discussion. Because I know we're looking at a looming, conversion cost that I don't want to spend on this building. And if this property can provide some of that relief for us, I joke about it being the trailer we move into while we build a new house. It's a pretty nice trailer, and we could be there for a while and be comfortable. So I would like to know how we're configured downtown. I think that's a really important thing to know. Because I'd like to get everybody out of this building as soon as we can before we have to look at the money for a conversion. So there is a time pressure on us to look at that. So I think that's a very good discussion to have.
Okay, I think we're ready for the motion. It's on the table.
Thank you, Mayor. I move to support the Bennett Management Company proposal in concept and direct the city manager to bring back additional project details for consideration, including A, the transfer of ownership of the vacant parcel from Beam to Bennett Management Company, along with the assignment of development rights under Beam's purchase and sale agreement. B, a resolution designating a recovery zone which would provide Bennett Management Company the opportunity to utilize recovery zone facility bonds to finance the project. And C, a resolution authorizing the city to issue recovery zone facility bonds in support of Bennett Management Company's project financing.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor, please indicate. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Alan?
Yes.
Okay, 8 in favor and none in opposition. It passes. Thank you for the presentation. Onward.
Onward it is.
Onward it is. Okay, the next item is one that Betty's been waiting for. Maybe somebody else does.
You think? Ain't she something? Ain't she something?
Longer than you have, Mike.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Certainly true.
Downtown parking.
Oh, yeah.
City manager.
Thank you, Mayor. And what I'll do is let me just have a couple of comments first, and I'll turn over to Jeff for the detail on as we move forward from here. So, as you can expect, downtown parking is one of those things that if you're in the profession much, you deal with it on an ongoing basis and have for 20-plus years. And so there's always a lot of good conversation around free or not free. One of the things that one of the values of having free parking is I do think it could potentially send a nice message as we're kind of moving through town revitalization, and that's part of what we've talked about here when we talk about Beam and LCC and Bennett's project. It can be one of those things that talks about a continuing energy level in downtown, and so that is a positive on that. I think what we will want to do if council chooses to do some portion of free parking is we'll want to collect data on sort of the impact of that on people actually coming downtown or not, so I think that's important. One other piece that what I've been concerned about all along, and as I look at the motion that Mike has put forward, addresses that one piece, is I have been concerned about conversation about essentially using general fund dollars to fund this. And that would be in the form of reducing the transfer, for example. And if that were to be the case, I would have some pretty significant financial concerns about that. As we kind of move through this piece, as you'll see, there is a period of time in which that we're able to use parking reserves to sort of float through this. And one of the things I appreciate in Mike's motion is we would need to have the discussion about the long-term financial direction of the parking fund. That is a critical piece for us. As you know, we have been spending a lot of time the last 2 years on stabilizing our financial situation. And so from that perspective, I'll turn over to Jeff and we can kind of go from there. So,
thanks, John. Hi. So today, we'd like to start today's conversation talking about a parking plan update, talking about the parking fund financial overview, and finish up with the downtown free parking conversation at the end of the presentation here. So the role of downtown parking, it's just a parking space, right? It's simple, piece of concrete on the ground, no emotions, nothing attached to it, but we know it's more than that. And parking is one of those tools we use to support existing development and promote new development. And it's bigger than the word parking. In Eugene, we've had a downtown parking exempt zone since 1948. What we tell our developers is you can build lot line to lot line, and you don't have to provide on-site parking. You build outside the downtown zone, we make you build parking lots. One of the outcomes in our downtown has been the city has provided structured parking. We have 6 garages that the city has built and we own and maintain. Those garages used to sit on surface lots as well as some other development sites. The city used to have a lot more parking lots downtown, and we're talking about the excitement around LCC. That is a surface lot that will disappear across from the library for higher and better uses. It's the on-street parking system, which also feeds into our supporting alternative transportation choices. Not only off-street surface lots, but on-street parking spaces are developable property. And when MX came through, they took up parking spaces. When bike lanes come in, they take up parking spaces. So we're always looking at parking as a higher and better use for whatever that might be out there. So parking tickets. One of the outcome of all this development tools is a parking ticket, and there's never any happiness around getting a parking ticket. One of our goals we've been working towards is reducing the number of parking tickets that we issue. And our tickets are half the price of the private sector tickets. So you think about the emotion that we get from a parking ticket, double that, triple it for the private sector. We've been successful at reducing the number of parking citations we issue. Just going back, 1973 is the last year I could dig up an old piece of these green and white pieces of paper that I vaguely remember. And going through time, we used to write 100,000 tickets a year, 90 to 100,000. We've working towards reducing that. Now we're down to the $60,000, $65,000 range, and we're going to continue that downward trend on the parking ticket. The parking strategy that we talked about in February is geared towards helping not only downtown development and bigger picture development, but also reducing the parking citations. So when we met in February, we talked about rebranding the city parking system to separate ourselves from the private operators. We talked about making it as easy as possible for people to have the parking transaction happen, increasing our parking garage safety, marketing our downtown parking system, business validation, and working with the downtown businesses, expanding the downtown free parking. We also talked about art in the garages, electric vehicle charging stations, newsletter, mobile apps, electronic parking permits, solar panels. And just for an update of where we are right now, it doesn't show up in blue. We are everything in bold there. We have either accomplished or we're working towards as we speak today. So we've made progress here. Rebranding our parking system, we went with an ePark Eugene image that you see here, and we roll that out as the opportunities avail themselves. We had an electric vehicle event at Lane County Fairgrounds earlier this year. We hung a banner up at that event because we're part of that conversation.
I'm sure everybody really gets that brand
Yeah.
locked in.
Don't make fun of branding now.
Got to get that. No control to one.
There we go. Easy payments. The credit card meters on the left, we piloted those in downtown Eugene last year. We're rolling them out in the campus parking district in the fall and September. Yesterday, we implemented pay by cell phone. That's the downtown parking lot and library, photo taken yesterday. We're actually going to marry these two together. We're going to be the second city in the United States to have pay by cell phone on individual meter heads, which means when you visit the campus, if you choose to use a pay by cell phone, it will send you a text message when your time expires. You can add more time if you want to. And we think this will drastically reduce our parking citations. The same true in the parking lot. But we haven't eliminated the other payment options. We're making it as easy as possible. We take coins, we take bills, we take credit cards, we take cell phones. Not sure what else is left. Mobile apps. So there's mobile apps, BlackBerry, Droid, and iPhones attached to these two. We are the first city in the Pacific Northwest that implemented pay by cell phone. Marketing the downtown program. We didn't put the actual artwork up here, but ePark was a sponsor of the Park Your Art Here contest you might see on the parkade this summer in the city. We're going to keep that rolling. Billy and Isaac, the summer in the city, they have just creative juices that are flowing, and we're going to keep stuff going here.
Mike wants to know what you do.
I would like to participate. It's right outside the window in my office. I look at it every day, so I'm just wondering, can I help
Put you on the committee.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So we developed a mobile app. We're one of a few cities in the United States, although in the world, that has this highly detailed mobile app of how to find parking on the street. And then we have this other thing that's pretty cool, and Portland has it, and we're going to have it. It's called on-street bike corrals, and this is where you take underutilized on-street spaces, yellow zones, or metered spaces, and you convert it to a bike corral. You essentially park a bunch of bikes on there, and we're trying to tie that into a call for artists to design. Please tell me that's not my.
That's timing right there, Ted.
Just parking space calling.
I need I need to go make a payment here.
Knew that was
timing.
Didn't you? You know that was coming. Yeah.
So the bike corrals, they find it actually enhances business economic activity when you can park your bike in front of the store. We have 3 locations in downtown Eugene, and as soon as we can get our crews freed up from implementing the event parking district, we'll have these in downtown Eugene.
Where are you?
So Morning Glory by the train station. Lucky Noodle is a proposed site, and the Kiva are 3 locations we'd like to do.
Do they pay?
We've had some conversations with the Kiva owner, and it's going well.
I hear he can be a tough negotiator.
He is.
Is he
He's
paying
tough.
a fee?
Big fee.
You know, the parking fund, they're not, these are hundreds of dollars. This is a good thing. This is a good thing for us to spend money on. So what does this mean? Well, there is a financial impact to shrinking the number of parking tickets, and parking citations generate a little under $1 million a year, and I hope to come back to you and say that I have a parking problem because we're writing less parking tickets. I think that would be a good problem to solve. But let's look at the financial forecast of the parking fund. It is an enterprise fund. It's a standalone fund. It doesn't look good. It shows our balance available within 2 years declining to $0. Part of the decline in the last 2 years, the FY09, FY10 period ending, the parking fund has lost $500,000 in each of the years, so $1 million over the last 2 years. 70% of that is due to increases, enhancement in the parking garage security. The city manages 6 parking structures around the core of downtown. We provide a 24/7 security service that's linked in with the new downtown safety force that meets every week. And they're out there when the guides are not on the street and when the police can't be there. So they're direct cell phone connection. They see something that shouldn't be going on, and they call. The parking fund enhanced security to make sure we had some large businesses downtown that were getting uncertain about downtown because of some security a couple years ago, and we added fixed post security in the Broadway garages, and the activity in the garages dropped to almost 0 with that enhancement. But we have a plan. We have a plan that can balance the parking fund at a little over $1 million of balance available in about a year to 2 years here. We're going to straighten that line out. Part of that balancing strategy is increasing the use of easy payment options. We talked about those earlier. We're focusing on neighborhood safety through enforcement. I meet regularly with the South University neighborhood, the Fairmont neighborhood, the West University neighborhood, and we're working with them to expand our enforcement hours in the neighborhood to try to address the concerns around blocked driveways, blocked sidewalks, fire hydrants, those type of concerns. So they're happy we're out there addressing those issues. The event parking district, we have a very large construction project happening at the University of Oregon Arena, and that's going to bring more people to our campus area. Part of the campus parking district, we have an expansion of the parking program and increase in rates on campus. And we're also relocating meters from low-demand areas in downtown out to the campus area. Another area that the reduction of our staffing footprint in the parking fund at FTE, approximately 30% of all of our parking tickets are paid online, so we don't need as much resources to open envelopes and process checks. And we've also reduced the number of parking citations we write, so we've been able to see some cost savings in our staffing footprint. So taking us back up to the 30,000 Google Earth view, this is the city of Eugene. The parking program has jurisdiction throughout the entire city of Eugene. We run a storage on the street, abandoned car program. We're up in Crescent Village enforcing their 2-hour on their streets. We're out there doing things. Our primary service delivery area is downtown to campus, University of Oregon to downtown here. We have a strategy for the campus area, working with the neighborhoods closely, working with the University of Oregon. And then we're moving to downtown here. The dark blue are publicly owned parking garages and some surface lots. The tan are privately owned parking lots in downtown Eugene. And we have a strategy around the parking structures. And these are the on-street parking spaces, and this is where we're asking for your vision and your input for the on-street downtown parking spaces. In February, after several meetings of the City Council Subcommittee on downtown parking, we brought back some choices around the downtown meters. There was a big $650,000 number, and we kind of provided some options. The direction from council at that time was to bring something back that is small in scale, the $100,000 to $200,000 range, and have a sunset clause in there that's either based on time or a downtown development option. So in the packet on pages 229, 230, 231, we present these following options. Option one, we label these by the meter revenue that's collected on the street in the area. So we have a $220,000 on-street free parking option, essentially from 7th to 11th Avenue, Lincoln, over to Willamette. We have a $160,000 on-street free parking program, Lincoln to Olive, 7th to 11th. Then we have $120,000 that goes from 8th to 11th, Lincoln to Olive in this area. And what we present here is the direct revenue collected at the parking meters in these areas. We don't, you can see there's some garages and off-street parking in these areas. We don't know the impact. Some people would choose not to pay the daily rate to park in the parking structures. They may come on the street. We don't know what that number is. We can come up with some guesstimates in the range that we work through in the parking subcommittee, but we'll just present these direct revenue estimates. And that's all I have.
Mike? Betty. And then
Sorry,
George.
Betty.
Forward.
Jeff, thank you very much.
And Alan. Yep.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Appreciate all the work that your staff has done, too, and I appreciate the other parking subcommittee members and their time to work on this as well. As was mentioned, I do have a motion, but I'll wait to the second round for that until we've had a chance to talk about this a little bit. And I'll speak to that after making it. But I think that what you are doing around trying to make it more convenient for people is a worthwhile goal, and I appreciate the total story of what we're trying to do to make it more inviting and easier for people to come downtown. I think at a time when, as I think has been said a couple of times here, that where we are watching all these projects happen that total up to over $80 million worth of investment in our downtown in the middle of a very difficult economic time. I think that's a good story to tell. And the more that we're doing to make downtown inviting and the more that we're doing to make it easier for people to come downtown, I think is a worthwhile thing to do. And we're doing everything that we can with public safety. So I think that the council is doing the sort of things that we should be, and I appreciate your hard work. I think that free parking is an integral part of that, but like I said, I'll make my motion after everybody else has a chance to talk. Thanks.
Betty?
And you can put me down for a second.
Thank you. I was also on this committee, and I don't see my choice as one of our options. I thought we were going to get, my choice was to go as far south as 16th Street, and definitely as far east as High. You left out a big part of downtown in all of these. 16th, the reason for down there is anytime if you drive by, you'll see empty parking meters on Oak Street, Pearl Street. If there were no meters there, people could park there and walk downtown, which would that's an important part of encouraging, making people feel friendly, that downtown is friendly. When I first came here in 1979, first thing I saw was, as I approached downtown, was "Welcome to Downtown, Park Free." And it really did feel welcoming. And frequently, I couldn't get a place right downtown. Well, part of it was not even open at that time. But I could park down on Oak Street almost always and it's a short walk, and I wouldn't have to worry about if I had lunch and then maybe stopped in a card shop or something else or saw somebody to talk to. I didn't have to worry that I was going to get a ticket because I have to rush back. And there were many times later, when you started having parking, when I'd be driving back from Corvallis when I was teaching at OSU, and I would think, I'll stop downtown for lunch. And then I thought, no, it's just not just lunch. It's lunch, a tip, it's parking, and if I take time with lunch, a ticket too. So I would say, no, I'll go some other place for lunch, home or to another place where there's free parking. And I do think it's an important investment to make people feel you're welcome downtown and you don't have to rush. I do want it to be at least a 3-hour period. I've talked to Mr. Camus over at Davis, and he, at the time I talked to him at least, he thought it was unfair competition that the restaurants at the 5th Street Market have 3-hour free parking so that people, be given a choice, somebody may say, well, I'll just go take the free parking and I won't have to rush. You can shop and and eat at the same time. So I think we should equalize it, and I think it should be a big enough area to be a real trial of what people will do, what they will use. People who are concerned about employees parking downtown, maybe they would park one of these streets down 16th Street, for example. You hardly ever see anyone park there because there are meters. So I really want it to be longer, and I'm disappointed that that wasn't one of the choices at the bigger area, which I think we all said what area we'd like, and my area isn't here. Thank you.
George Polling?
All I wanted to say is, remember, what we're doing is responding back to the last direction from the council back in whenever it was, to bring back a certain range of options. So we're responding back to the council at that time.
So in answer to that, Betty.
Yeah.
Skipping over the committee, okay.
Betty, in answer to that, if you wanted to, in the context of the council discussion, if you wanted to propose a larger area that would cost more than the limit that the council gave direction to, you could put that motion out there, and that would change the direction to staff.
Thank you.
Okay, George?
I think Mike covered some of the points that I was going to make about, making, a lot of activity going on downtown, and we need to make the downtown even more inviting than it is. I mean, we're starting to see increase of people in the downtown area. Some of the questions that I had actually pertain to Mike's motion, so I'll save those for later, so put me in the second round. But I remember when I first moved here in 1976, the downtown free parking, and thought that was a great idea, and like Betty, just all of a sudden it seemed like it was no longer free parking, and I tended to stay away from the downtown area, one, because of trying to find some place to park, and two, not having a pocket full of change all the time. So, I appreciate all the information and all the research that's been put into this, and it's given us a lot of good food for thought.
Alan?
Thank you, Mayor. I wanted to compliment Jeff Petrie. I think the parking program he's outlined is really great, and Jeff's been doing a great job. Who knew that parking could get so high-tech? I really like the parts of the parking program that make it easier and more convenient for people to pay. I fully support those. I think those are great. As Jeff often said, we don't want people walking around with $12 worth of quarters in their pockets. It makes it kind of difficult to walk around. But as regard to the specific proposal at the front of us, there is no such thing as free parking. Actually, there is a high cost to free parking, as a matter of fact. And if we did away with all parking meters in the downtown, correct me if I'm wrong, Jeff, that's what, $650,000 to the general fund that would go away. And in this case, I think I'm not sure what Mike's going to propose, but the option one is almost $250,000 subsidy without a clear outcome. I wish there was a clear linkage between free parking and increased economic activity, but there really is not, and you can't show that. If the intent of our pilot that we did last year was to show that there was an increase in economic activity, then I'd declare that pilot a failure. And if the outcome was to make people feel better, the business owners feel better about what was going on downtown, I think that happened, but it sure will be expensive to do this. To be really clear, this free parking program has a high cost. It either comes out of the general fund, or we increase rates at other parking meters or the parking garages, making them less appealing, or we drive the parking fund into a deficit and have other unintended consequences. And so I just really can't support this any of these proposals to forego the meter revenue, because I just don't clearly see the benefit, but I sure as heck see the cost.
Okay, thank you. Chris, you're next.
Thanks. It's interesting because for me, as we have been wanting to try to get to, is describe the best possible outcome. And for me, a best possible outcome would be to be able to have free parking downtown. I believe that's a good thing. I came about the same time some of the other folks did, and I remember free parking downtown, and I think it was a real inducement for increased activity down there. I appreciate that we would absolutely want to measure it, because I do rely on accurate, realistic information to know whether something is indeed working or not. The issue for me, the area of pressure for me is I'm willing to look at free parking downtown because I think it is a good outcome. But for me, and this is the piece where I agree with Alan, is you don't want to do it at the expense of something else. I don't want to see a city program that is useful or important to us be cut. I don't want to see us increase rates in some other part of town to compensate if that creates a burden on that part of town. So I guess what I'm asking for is to get an indication from staff that the proposal that will probably be offered up, you do have a path that you can see, not only to accommodate it this year, but what kinds of ideas you might have for a longer term way to address it that doesn't create an undue burden.
I'll take a piece of this, and Jeff, you can weigh in a little bit too. I think the getting back to not wanting to transfer it to the general fund, I think that does create lots of potential issues. Keeping it within the parking fund, we will need to come back in the next 6 months or so and have a broad discussion about the long-term health of the parking fund. What you saw in the graph there was we are currently implementing these balancing strategies to create a stable fund. Those were part of the budget process and other processes as we've gone, which starts to stabilize that. There is a cost to any actions that we take in the parking fund. What we'll need to do is come back and have a conversation about what has been the impact or what would be the impact, and if there is some other things we need to do to ensure the long-term health of the fund, we'll just need to have a conversation about that and agree what those may or may not be. So I couldn't tell you right now what is the, do we have a direct connection between this is what we want to do and need to do versus something we wouldn't want to do. I don't think we have that level of detail yet. I don't know if that answers your question in enough detail. I guess what I'm trying to say is we want to have the conversation in 6 months about the fund in total, just so we're all moving forward in the same way. And if the council chooses to implement whatever option, what we would do is we have some free board in the parking fund right now to be able to handle that, and then we'll come back and have the longer conversation, broader conversation.
So if I'm hearing correctly, what you're saying is, if we wanted to implement something on a motion today, you have the capacity to handle it right now.
Correct.
For X period of time until we could have a longer conversation about it. But for you, the challenge is you can't identify right now what those 6 months from now options might be.
And to be fair, I think we also have to recognize there's a lot of things that impact the parking fund. Mm-hmm. This is just one of a dozen or a score of different variables that go into the financials of the parking fund. It's everything from how many permits are bought or not bought, how many people choose to pay their, feed their meter on time. I mean, there's a whole lot of things. So it would be in the context of all of that has to get considered on the long term.
So this is the part where I rely heavily on your expertise as our advisor and as our kind of conduit into the budget of the city of Eugene.
Right.
knowing you don't know exactly what those might be, but since you have probably far more knowledge about the budget and the finances of the city of Eugene than certainly I do, if you had your crystal ball in front of you a little bit, and you're advising me as to whether you think it is realistic to have that conversation in 6 months and come out of it successfully, are you, in your mind, feeling some real concern about that conversation, or are you feeling optimistic that there's a reasonable chance we could have a successful outcome in that conversation? I'm relying on your perspective.
I think we have a successful outcome, and here's why I think so. I think the last couple of years, as we've worked through the budget, we've worked through financial kinds of things, I think we've had some very positive, not always easy conversations, and I think at the end of that, what we've done is we've come out in good places. So the answer is, do I think we can have a good, constructive conversation? Absolutely. We will want to have that conversation, so we will definitely do that.
Okay, good. And I rely on you a lot for that perspective, and that's why I push on it, because I want to know what you think will come, and that's very helpful for me.
Okay, Andrea, you're next.
Thank you. So this is an interesting conversation. I represent downtown, and I've talked to a few people down there, not as many as Mike has, working downtown. And I'm still not convinced this is what's going to be bringing people downtown personally. I feel like we've done a lot for downtown. Like I said the other night about the public safety zone, we've thrown everything with the kitchen sink at it. I was going to say chicken sink, but that's another part of town. And so, I'm definitely, I hear what the people are saying down there. I would be willing to possibly support, the most I would support is option 3 with a sunset. I feel like, and with the financial impact that you were talking about, kind of along the same lines, I feel that once we get critical mass downtown, the conversation is going to be different. And I don't want to have to backtrack and, have people say we need people moving along a little bit quicker. Those people come and they park in front of our car, our businesses, and they're there, and they walk 3 blocks down the street to go eat at the other restaurants. I don't know that we can ever always make everybody happy. But I am willing to do that, because I think that while there's construction going on, that it's more challenging for people to be down there to begin with. So I would be willing to support option 3 at the most, with a sunset of October 12th, because that's when my term ends, and so I would be here to talk about it. And I like putting sunsets on things like this because it brings stuff back up to, I think that's when it is, isn't it, George? January. Well, no, but I mean,
She'd be here in October.
I'll be here in October 12th.
2012.
2012. I like to have sunsets on things that we do. Don't worry about my time here, because I feel like that makes us bring these conversations back to the table, and knowing how they're working, whether people are still happy with it in the community, do we need to tweak it this way or that way. I don't want to see us cost shifting to the university. I think that's a big financial impact on people there too, and we hear a lot from the people that live there too. I think that is another issue that they have. So that's where I'm at with this. I feel like, I don't know. I just have a lot of issues around this. So that's about all I have to share, Mary.
Okay, George Brown?
Thank you. I just have a few more questions and then a couple comments. You said there's been a pretty significant reduction in citations over the last fair amount of years. Is that because people are behaving better and paying a higher percentage, or is that because of non-enforcement?
So our parking meter revenue increases annually by about 2%. So we think people are still using the system, and it's growing. In the 70s and 80s, we had a different downtown. Downtown looked different, and we had more surface parking lots. We had we wrote a lot of tickets for employees parking in those lots, 3-hour maximum parking. It was just different at that time, and I think we even had less parking enforcement officers at that time. So it's hard to compare apples to apples, because downtown looked much different in the 70s and 80s than it does today.
Yeah, okay. Well, I have gone back and forth about this. For many years, I thought, oh boy, we should definitely have free parking downtown. Nobody should have to pay. That way everyone would be able to use it. And the town that I think many of us compare that idea to is Corvallis, because they've, well, first of all, they did not use the urban renewal tool, so they have all of their original architectural stock downtown. And with people living, like downtown, it used to be people living up above, and then but for the most part, locally owned stores that are unique, not necessarily chain stores. There's a few, but almost none, and free parking. It's just a great mix. And I think they do have parking meters in other parts of town, like near the university. I seem to recall having a fee meter. But they have somehow found a nice balance. Have you had conversations with them?
All the time, yep.
Yeah.
It's the financial rubrics.
Gems of wisdom that
It's different.
see from them?
The two communities and how we set up the structure of the system are different. I mean, it's it's not there's no general fund transfer. Other communities use urban renewal to pay for parking. Other communities use, it's different. So it's hard, once you look at the details, it's not apples to apples.
Yeah. Well, whatever, they had it really good, because downtown's always active. It doesn't matter which day, and in the evening too, because there's a little bit of nightlife down there, late night restaurants and some clubs. Okay, thanks for that. I'm inclined to support Councilor Clark's motion, but I kind of want to see, I'd like to see a sunset on any kind of a plan like that we try it for a year or something like that. Is that, like in the 70s when we had free parking, do you have any idea why we got rid of it? Looking through archival, we needed to raise money, probably, right?
There are multiple factors. One of the differences in communities are big stores downtown left. And at that time, we levied 3 taxes to pay for free parking. It was a business pay tax. And at that time, when the big stores left and some changes in state laws, you couldn't levy those taxes. We switched to a customer paid system at that time. But it was different. I mean, we had a lot. It was a different downtown at the time.
Okay. But anyway, I think there should be some kind of a test period that. And the reason, I think, is because my fear is that employees will abuse it. And I'm assuming that it would be patrolled. Would it be patrolled? And we would have if you go over the limit, you get a ticket?
I think
that's a little tricky, because welcome to downtown free parking. Oh my gosh, I went 10 minutes over. Wow, now I have a $10 ticket. Wow.
Managing
problems there,
The employees are the problems, right? That is the challenge that the parking management tries to work out, and I've heard from the business community that they would like some type of time limit on it, so it's not employee parking all day. And I think the parking profession would agree with that, and what that time limit is. We've tried 2 hours, we've tried 90 minutes. I think we have to figure something out there so employees are not rotating. When we did the survey of the free parking, we actually had people comment and say, could you make it 2 hours and 10 minutes so it could correspond to my shift, so I could rotate my car.
Right, sure, yeah.
And they emailed that to me, so I think that's but that's the input that I want to take back from council is, what are the values and what are we trying to accomplish? And we went after employees hard in the 70s, very hard in the 70s and 80s, and it wasn't pleasant.
This might be an area where we could ask Corvallis to go, like, hey, what do you do about, because you've got people working downtown, obviously, what do you do when they abuse that? I think it's probably worth another try again. Thank you.
So I just wanted to make a couple comments. One is that one of the things you have to take into consideration when you compare us to other communities is we did have the shopping centers appear, as did in much of the country, that sort of sucked the big stores out of downtown. So other places, smaller communities, didn't have those shopping, that kind of situation occur. So that's a huge piece of why we experienced and all the things that we tried to counteract that with mixed success. The things that Mike's going to put his motion on the table, but my concerns on here are I agree with trying to put out a message of being open for business and wanting people to come downtown, and if this helps us do that, then I'm okay with that. I am more inclined, as Andrea is, towards, if we're going to do it in a smaller, less expensive footprint. I would hate to tie us down to option one right now. And I also have trepidations about removing the meters before we have a chance to actually see how this works. So I would, if you're going to do it, I would be more for putting them for a duration or something, but you would have to tell us about the cost of removal, because if you tried it and it was unsuccessful and you had to bring everything back in, I don't know what the trade-offs are in terms of cost, and so that's part of the motion that's upcoming. And the other thing is, you were talking about the time limit. I'd really want to think about what the right time limit would be and how we would do that. And there's trade-offs too between the cost of meters and the cost of more people going around checking on whether you've reached your time limit or not. And I don't know about that either. So that there's an awful lot of unknowns here. The part that I'm okay with, I've heard so many people say, this is what I hear. On one side, I hear people say, we need to have free parking so that people will park downtown. But I pretty continually see a lot of parking spaces being utilized on a regular basis. And then I also hear, on the other hand, people fearful that there's not enough parking downtown right now. So I hear, need more parking. No, we don't have enough. I hear both those things all the time. I think it's a perception issue as much as anything, and I'm willing to work on the perception issue by trying to create a welcoming environment. I would just like to be sure that we're doing it in the most economical, sensible fashion without stepping too far out before we know what is really going on. Mike, you're going to put your motion on the table.
Thank you, Mayor, and when I get a second, I'd like to speak to it. Please move to direct the city manager to remove the on-street parking meters listed within the boundaries of option 1 on the AIS before October 1st of this year, to install limited-time parking signs within the same boundaries, and to hold a council work session within 6 months to discuss the long-term financial direction of the parking fund.
Second, and I want to speak also.
Okay.
Mayor, I'd like to be in the queue.
I brought this forward in the spirit of best outcomes. As you've spoken about the idea, and as many of us have, that what we want to do is create a more welcoming atmosphere for people. It's not just the businesses, it's the folks in our community who want to be able to come downtown in a more convenient way. I look over here, I see Dallas sitting in the front row. He's trying to operate a furniture store in our downtown, and he's competing against people. I didn't ask him to come down here, I just happened to see him, and he's competing against people who have stores where they have free parking all over, and I think if we're going to want people to stay in our downtown and do business there, we should be doing the things that support them. And I have to say that this is something that makes it easier for people to come downtown. That's the thing that's important to me. From my perspective, if we're going to do all this work to try to give breaks to companies and to people to help us rebuild downtown, it seems that we can afford to give a break to the people we want to come downtown. So it kind of makes sense that we should be looking at this from saving the people money who we want to come and be a part of our downtown and make it easier for them. Some of the time feature here, I think it should be rotational. I hear Betty wanting it to be 3 hours, and I hear staff saying, some more limited time, and other people have different opinions. I personally think, as a good compromise, it should rotate depending on staff's input from, 1 hour or 30 minutes in one place and maybe 3 hours in a different place within that option 1 boundary. My original idea for this motion was one that would just say, let's not make we have $500,000 of profit that we ship to the general fund from this fund every single year. And my original motion was let's just short it to $200,000 and only give it $300,000. But what I want to do is compromise and be reasonable and practical about this, and have us be able to come back and talk more about the long-term health of the fund. So that's why I wrote it that way. We also want to have the geography in the first position. I agree with Betty. I liked her map, too. I'd like it to go down to 16th. I'd like it to be wider all the way over to Pearl on the other side. But frankly, that the impact, and I recognize and appreciate that Andrea and others would like it to be smaller, but I think this is, in putting this forward, the compromise position, the reasonable position of middle ground, so that's why I did it. I'm probably going to have a couple other comments, and I have 20 seconds here, so...
You need to have the meters in there, taken out.
Yeah, and the part of that was having conversations with staff and with manager, the time certain in there for doing it. I don't want a sunset on this. I want it to be a permanent feature that we do downtown. And if you'll allow me a couple extra seconds here, we're already talking about adding new kinds of meters with credit cards and such, and if we have to put meters back, those are likely the ones we'll put back anyway.
All right, George Polling is next.
Well, first of all, free parking is not the only element that's going to bring people in the downtown. It's a combination of the increase of the activity, such as what the city's doing this summer, free parking, and other things such as LCC and the Beam Project and Bennett. That is what's going to bring the people downtown. It's all going to be combined. And for this to be successful, I think we need to call upon the employees to be honest about it, and also to get the merchant and the business owners to kind of police themselves on this and make sure that they're not abusing it, because in the long run it's going to hurt them, because if it doesn't work out, a future council may say it's not working out, let's bring it back to bring back the metered parking. And I had some questions as to how we're going to determine the length of the parking, free parking time in the different parts of the community. For example, I had some people, when they first put the meters in around the Hilton, that for them to go to their noon meetings there at the Hilton is at least an hour, and at the time there's only 1 hour maximum parking when they first installed those. So somewhere like that may be 2 or 3 hours, but down in the downtown core maybe an hour. How are we going to determine that? I don't know. I kind of like Andrea's idea of a 2-year sunset on this, October of 2012, to kind of take a look at it, see how it's working, and try to get some feedback from people, get feedback from the business community.
Is that a friendly?
Yes.
Accepted.
And also then, along those same lines, where it says to remove the on-street parking, should we say to remove or disable the on-street parking meters? Or is it better just to leave it there?
And Jeff, you can weigh in. What I would suggest on a couple of things, on the length of time that the meters are, I guess I would suggest maybe we leave that up to Jeff to kind of work that out with the businesses and all. I mean, he deals with it all the time, and he can probably figure that out. Whether or not we actually physically remove the meter or the pole or both, or we hood them, I think what we would initially want to make sure they're not in use somehow. We move through it. I know Jeff may want to use some of the meters in the campus districts. We may want to take some of those down there. And again, I guess I would suggest that we let Jeff sort of help figure some of that out for us, and we don't necessarily have to decide meter by meter how each of them works. That would be my suggestion. I took this to mean that when we move the on-street parking meters, what that means is we're no longer using the meter.
Right.
Now, whether that's a physical thing or not, some of them may go away. So.
And then just one last point, I'm happy to support this motion because I'm tired of listening to the commercials on TV about downtown Corvallis where there's always free parking.
So we are looking at 22 minutes after the hour. I have Betty, Andrea, Alan, and Chris in the queue. We're going to need to vote in about, I'd say, 4 minutes. So if you want to make your case quickly, that would be really good.
1 minute lightning round?
Yeah.
You always say quickly when it's my turn.
I thought it was me she did that.
That is, it's
but I'm
only
in
when
line after.
when
Okay.
you have 4 minutes left to go.
We didn't subtract the cost of enforcement from the money that we're taking in. We have people in those little carts going around all the time giving tickets. I'm sure we could save some money if we don't do that. As for the mayor's comment about some people say there's not enough space, if you did what I wanted and opened up Oak Street, that opens up a lot more space, for a lot more parking spaces. As for the time, all you have to do is look at Fifth Street Market to see an example of an area, commercial area downtown that is extremely successful. and people get to park for 3 hours there without worry. So you can eat a leisurely lunch and go through the shops and still not risk getting a ticket. Thank you.
Andrea?
Well, I'm not going to support the motion. Fancy that. Thank you for putting the sunset, George, though, because I really want to talk about this again. People or services, that's what I want to know what we're going to cut here, because that's what we're talking about. People or services. That's going to be your choices of what, when John brings us back this conversation. Fifth Street Market is a flagship, that's true, but it's going to change there because they're going to be building five-star hotel there. And to tell you the truth, a lot of people in my constituency don't go to Fifth Street Market. They cannot afford to go there. They take the bus. So, and it's a higher end thing. I hope that's not what people's vision is of downtown, because I want it to be open for all people. So, services or people? That's what I want to know, John, when you come back.
Alan?
Yeah, well, my best outcome is a thriving, vibrant downtown as well, and I think we made great strides with that with all the projects that are going on right now. And I want to send a message that we're open for business, but I don't think this is how we do it. And I'm real unclear about what the city manager said about how this is going to happen. I mean, I don't get where this money is going to come from. There's three options. You can hit the general fund and cut programs, you can increase meter rates and structured parking rates, or you can decrease the parking fund and make it go deficit. So I'm curious where that's going to come from. And then the third question I have is, how do we determine if this is successful? What are the metrics? I mean, are we going to talk about increased economic activity, which I think is extremely difficult to gauge and prove? Are we talking about, do people feel better about it? Well, who doesn't like free? I mean, that's a silly question. And the other thing we want to look at when we come back is, who uses this? I'm really concerned that this is just going to be an employee-free parking program. So I won't support the motion.
Chris?
Thanks. Yeah, quickly. I agree we need to have good metrics, we need to have good measurements, because I like the sunset, and if you hadn't taken it as a friendly, I probably would have proposed it as an amendment, and I think it's a good thing. We do need to talk about it. I'm going to trust that the city manager is creative enough that we're not limited in terms of what our options are, that it won't just be people or programs or services. Those are the easy ones for us to think of, but they may not be the ones that the city manager may think of. I don't know. I don't presume to know what that is. I don't hear anybody opposing free parking. I think the issue is about the money. And so that really is what the focus of the conversation is, our concern over whether or not we can afford to do this. And that's an absolutely legitimate question to ask. We're obliged to ask that as elected officials. We have to protect our budget. What I want to do, though, is to see if we can't, through this investment, and let's think of it that way, get some kind of a return, but then consider whether we got a real return or not. So I think it will be important to know. So I don't want to take the meters out. I want to have a sunset, and if we need to put it back in place, we can put it back in place. But I'm willing to take the chance and try it, because I think it's an investment, and sometimes you take risky investments because you think they might pay off. And that, whether you're building a building or providing free parking, there's always risk, and that's part of what we do.
So, Mike, do I understand if with this motion and listening to people talk around the table that this does not necessarily mean physically removing the meters?
I would prefer that they be removed, but I'm going to accept the city manager who has said that we are going to make them clearly disabled or clearly removed. Did I get that right?
Yeah, they will clearly disable. Some of them may be removed. I'm just suggesting we leave it up to Jeff as we operate.
I would actually prefer them be all removed, but I'm going to not push that point.
Good.
Me too.
Okay. All right, with that understanding, all those in favor, please indicate. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in favor, and in opposition, 1, Alan?
No.
2 in opposition, it passes. Thank you.
I'm sorry, Mayor, we have to point out that the amended motion, the consent to the second was not.
Betty didn't consent to the
I
friendly
will
on the
I'll
sunset.
consent.
She consents.
Retroactively, I consent.
All right.
Thank you, Wade.
All right, thank you, everybody.
Good catch.
Have a great break.
We're on break.
So I didn't know
On
Andrea's...
break?
I didn't know...